Hi everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and this is a roundup. At the end of each week, I send out a roundup. Usually it's a video lecture. Sometimes it is in the form of just typing in an email format. It is always found under the announcements section, so it's really important that you go to your settings under your account, and you can set up how you want to receive notifications that an announcement has been made in the class. If not, you could just log in and see that an announcement has been made. A little sign shows up, or a little a ticker shows up here that there's an announcement. So we are almost finished week 1 of this course, and I like to recap what happened and go over some housekeeping items, as well as introduce or go over some of the concepts that we covered last week. This week, of course, is a challenging week because it's the first week of the course, so everyone's kind of like, thrown into a boiling pot of water. And some of you succeeded and some of you did not. So you need to take the weekend if you did not succeed and get yourself caught up to speed on what the requirements are for the course. So just a couple basic housekeeping items. Number 1, you have to read the syllabus for the course. In any course you take, in any part of life, it's like the contract. You wouldn't take a job without the contract. So you want to make sure you read the syllabus, understand my expectations for the course, and what the requirements are for you. The other thing is that you'll notice that under the module sections, there is something called the course information session. You really need to read the documents under here because a lot of you are not submitting your forum posts properly. So there's a couple just basic rules. They can be found in the syllabus. They can be found in these documents here. There's even an example of forum posts on what I would like it to look like. A lot of you miss deadlines, and that's going to happen until you learn that the initial post is always due by Wednesday, the response post to a fellow classmate is due by Friday. That can be found in multiple places in the course. So if you're missing those deadlines because when you log in, you're only looking at what's due, which is what's coming up, then you're at fault because it's in multiple places look, it's right here. It's in multiple places. It's in the syllabus. It's in this video. I mean, it's found multiple places. That the initial posts are always due by Wednesday. Response posts to fellow classmates are due by Friday, and there are requirements to those. So you can't just submit whatever you want and it counts. I know this is a summer class, but I also still know it's a college class. So a couple things. Number 1. Initial posts need to be at least 300 words. They need to contain proper citations. You need to use the sources I have given you as the mainstay in your posts. Then you make a response post to a fellow classmate by Fridays. Those response posts need to be at least 200 words. You agree, you disagree, and you explain why. In initial posts, you definitely should not be using any I statements, so your opinion, and I know this sounds harsh, but your opinion doesn't matter. You can say the same thing without saying I, or I believe, or I think, or this is my thoughts. You can say the same thing by taking that out and then backing up why you're saying what you're saying with factual basis. So as per da-da-da, this is why this is the outcome of X, Y, and Z. Okay. Another thing is that there's paragraphs. I know when you type things out in Word and then you copy and paste into the reply box, sometimes that doesn't come through. You need to go then in manually and put in paragraphs so that they show up. Okay. I do not allow edits. So, and there's multiple reasons for that. If you mess up, then you need to resubmit the entire post. The other thing is, you need to have the question at the top. Everyone just doesn't know what the questions are. So you need to have the question at the top. And remember, only 6 students can answer each question. So if you're a late logger inner at like Wednesday afternoon, you then probably need to pick a question that most people haven't answered, and usually they're the harder questions. So it's in your best interest to log in early and get in and make an initial post. The other thing is if you plagiarize from another student, and I've noticed this in multiple times, is like I've noticed that other people have the same thoughts as someone else. Yeah, that doesn't fly with me. I'm a big stickler for plagiarism. So if I catch or I get a feeling that you're copying information from another student, I will flag you and I will report you to the college, because it's really important that someone else doesn't put the work in, and then you log in on Wednesday night at 11 o'clock and you read what someone else wrote, and then you just try and reword it into your own thoughts. That's not how this works. So make sure that you're following those rules. I'm a real stickler for it. So if you find yourself doing that, figure out a way that you don't You maybe pick a different question or something. Or don't go read what other people write before you submit it. And then that way you get yourself out of that habit. So by tonight, 11:59, which is July 12th, you have two response posts, one for each session to your fellow classmates. The other thing is this is a 7-week course. We usually cover everything in 14 weeks, so that means we cover 2 sessions per week. So you have 2 initial posts due each week, 2 response posts, and sometimes 2 quizzes. Now this week you luck out. You only have 1 quiz due by Sunday, 11:59 on the introduction chapter. All of the quizzes relate to the chapter readings, usually not to the additional articles or readings. Usually it deals with the chapter reading in the text and the PowerPoint. Okay, so that's enough. I'll get off my soapbox. You are adults, so I'll get off my soapbox. This week we covered Tragedy of the Commons, which is a really, really important topic. It's absolutely essential in all environmental problems stem from Tragedy of the Commons, which is the fact that we look for a short-term interest and we don't think about the long-term problems that it causes to society. And while Hardin talks about population or overpopulation in his reading, we can relate to any problem. Population, pollution, we could talk ocean pollution, we could do air pollution, we could do climate change, we could do littering. I mean, the plastics in the ocean. How about single-use plastics? I mean, the sky's the limit. We just want short-term gains. We just want our convenience, and we just don't think about the long-term interests of society. Big problem. Now, Hardin's article, the whole point of Hardin's article, which can be a little bit difficult to read, but you need to read it before the midterm exam, is that he gives a bunch of technical solutions. So all these people put out their technical solutions. They try to implement privatization or mutual corrosion or the welfare state, all of these different things to try and help people realize that they're destroying the commons. And then what happens is those technical solutions really don't work. They might work a little bit, like mutual corrosion works a little bit, which is like parking tickets, but there's always still people who don't pay their parking tickets. So there are these technical solutions. The problem is these technical solutions don't work because, as Hardin states, it needs an extension in morality. So we need something else. There has to be something else behind it for us to change our behaviors. He talks about education. He talks about this idea that we have this morality, and a lot of times that morality does come through education. So there's a lot of things that Hardin has to say in this article. So it's absolutely essential that you read this article, okay? This, also invasive species. So remember, invasive species are only a tragedy of the commons when they are brought in for short-term gain. So if a species is introduced into an ecosystem by natural means, meaning like a bird, or like a bird carries a seed into another area, or I don't know, maybe a species migrates, or for example, the Japanese duck. That is something that we can't control because nature created the tsunami, and I guess we could say humans created the concrete, but there's a lot of things involved in there. The only way it's a tragedy of commons is when people bring in species for their short-term gain. It could be like the Asian carp, where we brought them in to control algae in lakes in the Mississippi, and then when the Mississippi River flooded in the early 1990s, and then the water receded, it brought the Asian carp with it. That is an example of a tragedy of commons, because we brought that in for human need, short-term human need, and we just didn't think about the long-term issues with it. The Burmese python is a great example of this in Florida. So the toothy python, there's a lot of different ones. Snakehead fish, we can find those in the Schuylkill. So they're good examples of short-term gain. This week, you have 2 things due coming up. So we're going to cover session 3 and 4. So by next Wednesday, 11:59, you have an initial post due for ethics, economics, and policy, and you have one due for consumption and waste. Okay? At the end of next week, you also have 2 quizzes due. So by July 21st, you have ethics and economics policy quiz and consumption quiz. So these are both on the readings, these that deal with the textbook. Okay, so don't forget, you have the introduction quiz that's due by July 14th, and that goes with the introduction chapter. So this is what's due next week. You have 2 initial posts and 2 quizzes due, and you have 2 response posts due. So you have a lot due next week. Remember, this is a 7-week course, so we have to speed up the process. Couple little things as we move into next week. I just want to briefly go over a couple things. This document's really important. So we're going to go over economics, ethics, and policy. We're going to talk about We're going to talk about how we can put a price tag on nature. Yes, we can. It's just not accurate. And there are different valuation methods we use. A lot of these are biased, where we ask people what they're willing to spend. But then when we knock on their door and say, oh, it's time to pay up, they change that amount. So you want to take a look into that. Cap and trade is another thing that's going on. This is where we give credits for pollution, like we regulate it. And we say that, here's the new limit, and if you can meet that limit, you can sell these credits on like a stock market. And there's a lot of problems with that, but there's also some success stories. So here is a really good little video on that. There's a question about environmental justice, which is talked about in your textbook. Remember, environmental injustice usually used to take place just because of race, but now it really takes place because of lack of education and lack of income. So people in areas where there's lack of education, lack of income, those people are usually taken advantage of, and it's really, really awful. So there's a lot of things involved with that. The next thing is we're going to cover stuff. So consumption, all the single-use plastics and waste that we produce today. The video story stuff is fantastic. It talks about perceived planned obsolescence and externalization of costs. So they're really important concepts. Does consumption buy happiness? This article is fantastic. It talks about the idea that it does not buy happiness. Really, the two items that buy happiness are leisure consumption, which is vacations because it brings about social connectedness. So the idea of buying experiences rather than stuff. And the other thing is actually vehicle consumption, because yes, there is a status involved with it, and you'll read that in the article, but also it brings about social connectedness. So we can go see people at an easier than if we're taking public transportation, which leads to us to be happier. Okay, so there are things in there. So there's a lot of different things involved with these articles. If you have questions, of course, feel free to reach out. Usually I send out these roundups on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday leading into the next week, just so that you have a sense of what's going on with the past week and what you have to look forward to ahead. Remember, lots coming up, lots due. Make sure you write out, have a planner, have everything written out with due dates, and then that way you're not missing anything in this course. Of course, remember, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out, and I look forward to your response posts to classmates due by tonight, your introduction quiz due by Sunday, and then your initial post due by next Wednesday. Have a good weekend.